Hello and welcome to my channel. Are your project meetings dragging for a long time? Are your project meetings not giving you outcome? Don't worry, you're not alone, but it doesn't have to be that way. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the process of running a very effective project management meeting. If you're a project manager, aspiring project manager, practicing project manager, this video is for you. It is very apparent that as a project manager, you're able to run effective meetings. Why? In most projects, a project manager is always chairing the meetings. So if you're chairing the meetings and you don't know how to run them effectively, you will not achieve what you want to achieve in that meeting. So I'm going to take you through step by step with different sections on how you should run your meetings effectively if you're a project manager. So let's get started. So the first section I'm going to look at is, why do meetings fail? Does it have to fail? No. This is how I've been running my meetings. The first thing you need to do is to make sure that you have an agenda for the meeting. So agenda is very important. Agenda for the meeting is very important. You cannot go for a meeting where everyone is not expecting or does not know what that meeting is all about. So there must be a very clear agenda of the meeting, and that agenda must be communicated clearly to all concerned parties or participants or stakeholders who are going to be part of this meeting. Number two, why meetings fail? You'll find that in most cases, they fail because of poor time management. I've seen so many project managers who are not very good when it comes to time management in a meeting. A meeting which was supposed to take 30 minutes, it will take 2 hours. That's a complete failure as a project manager. If your meeting was scheduled for 1 hour, you must be running it, controlling it, having discussions, taking time into consideration. So it must be run for an hour. Maybe a deviation of 10 or 15 is better, but I've seen a deviation of 2, 3, 4 hours for a meeting of 1 hour. That's not the effective way of running a project. And what it means is you might be wasting time for the people who are supposed to be doing the work in meetings. You must reduce the meetings and do more of work. That is the only way that can help the project to be successful. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. Number 3, on why meetings fail, is lack of engagement. From my experience, it is very important for the chairperson of the meeting or the project manager to be making sure that there's engagement from the team. If there's no engagement, that meeting is not going to achieve what it's supposed to achieve. So someone might be asking, what do you mean by engagement? Engagement is a process in a meeting where there are clarifications, there are questions, there are expected responses from the participants. And the chair must have the time to ask the participants their opinions, their guidance, or any of their suggestions based on the topic or the subject being discussed at that particular point in a project meeting. You could be discussing about the past phase. You could be discussing about the past subject. So that is also important as a project manager, to make sure that at least the subject being discussed, there is total engagement from all the participants. It will help the project to be successful. Then, on why meetings fail, number 4, is lack of expected and specified outcome. A project meeting must have specified outcome. A project meeting must have expected and defined clear outcomes. If that does not happen, it will be very difficult for participants to appreciate why they were called for that project meeting. So if you're a project manager, the very important step you have to take is to communicate what is expected out of that meeting. It could be a decision, it could be other action items, it could be any categorization of issues, but at least there must be very clear outcomes, especially at the end of the meeting. If you're a project manager, you have to make sure that you know you have documented the clear outcomes of that. So let's move on to the next section. This section is on the planning of the meeting. Remember, you're a project manager, you should also plan the meeting. That is very important. So let us look at the challenges or the problems or the issues that normally come with planning the meeting as a project manager, and how can you effectively run a project meeting without falling into these items. How can you effectively run the project meetings without facing these challenges or by controlling these challenges? So planning the meeting, point number 1, you should always define the purpose of the meeting. That is very crucial. Most project managers, they miss this point. They just go to a meeting, they start shouting at people if something's delayed, and so on and so forth. I've seen it, my counterpart from the other side. But the best is to define the purpose of the meeting as you go to the meeting. It might be for brainstorming, for example. It could be for decision making, for example. It can also be on the status update, as an example. So it can also be on the status update, brainstorming, or it could be also on decision making. So as a project manager, once you are able to define, or once you have defined your meeting purpose, when you go to a meeting, it becomes very easy. So you should always plan what exactly are you going to achieve, what exactly are you intending to achieve in the meeting. You define it early before the meeting. And as you are addressing participants in the meeting, you are also supposed to re-clarify or revisit the meeting purpose so that every participant or everyone or every stakeholder is aware of what has to be done, is aware of what needs to be done, is aware of what needs to be done. That is very important. If you don't do that, you find your meetings are going to drag and drag and drag without any specific direction. But from my experience, once you are able to define the purpose of the meeting, everyone is focused because they know why they are there. Are they there for brainstorming? Are they there just to get any updates? So it keeps the team focused and also motivated, even engaged in the meeting. And when you are planning your meeting, item number 2, you are supposed to choose the right participants. Choosing the right participants can also help to make the meeting successful. If you have got the wrong participants, from what I've seen in the field, you might go for a meeting with the wrong people. You want to brainstorm, no one is ready to brainstorm, or people are just arguing with no value addition, with no end. So make sure you pick the right participants. The other point as a project manager, which I've seen, is most projects, they have so many meetings. So you should be very careful when you're going for meetings. You do not want to take the people who are doing the work, you spend hours or minutes with them in meetings, and then you release them, you also expect them to do the work. No, you can't do that. You have some levels. You have some levels in your project. Say, for example, you start from your program manager, you have your project manager, then always have team leaders, and then you have the project team. The advantage of having this layer of team leaders is because if you're going to spend more time in meetings, they don't normally do a lot of work as compared to the foot soldiers. So allow the people or the team members to focus more on the project, and then the meetings just have one more layer. That is what I have always done in my projects. I always have team leaders for each and every work stream. I divide the project into a work stream. I divide the project into work streams. Then for each and every work stream, I assign a work stream leader. I don't expect the work stream leaders to do more of the work, but to support and guide the lower levels or the other team members. So that in my project, if I'm going to spend, especially the weekly meetings or the monthly meetings, just before the project board meeting, they normally stretch for at least 2 hours because you have to go through each and every work stream to get the updates. So I know I can spend more time with those work stream leads, whilst the other group or the lower levels, they are delivering the project. So you need to be very, very careful. When you're planning your meeting, you're supposed to invite the right participants. So we spoke earlier about agenda. So when you're planning your meeting also as a project manager, my advice is always make sure that you are setting the agenda. You also communicate that agenda in advance. The good advantage of doing that is when you go for that meeting or for any planned meeting, you have focused items to look into, you have focused items to discuss with the participants. In most cases, as a project manager, you find yourself chairing most of these meetings. That is very normal. I've been doing it before, and I believe you're also going to come across it. You've already come across it, and I believe you have managed to handle that situation. So you should always set the agenda and also communicate that agenda in advance. As a project manager, that is one of the survival tactics. Once you go to the meeting, everyone knows the agenda. You don't spend much time. You focus on what you're supposed to discuss, and then you move on. That is very critical in a project management process. Then the fourth point under planning of meetings is to set the expectations for contributions very clearly. Once you go to a meeting, like what I normally do, once I go for a meeting, I put on the table the agenda. I revisit the agenda with the team. I also clearly state the purpose of the meeting, and I also clearly state how people are supposed to contribute and what is the expected outcome. Is it a decision? Is it a solution? Is it just an update? Are there specific action items? So that is very critical. You should always set expectations for contribution in every meeting. Once you do that, you find that running the meeting becomes very easy in a project. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. Move on to the next section. The very important part of a meeting or to run a meeting effectively as a project manager is to start strong. So there are certain points you need to consider if you want to start strong in a meeting. For example, you need to start on time and you set the tone of the meeting properly. Imagine a project manager. The meeting is supposed to start at 10. You are coming at 10:15. Obviously, there's a problem. The participants have been waiting for you for 15 minutes and then you pitch up. That is not good for the meeting. Whatever you're going to say, people can even start doubting you. How can you appear to be organized when you came to the meeting late? So even the tone of your meeting is already distorted. So always make sure that when you start strong in your meeting, you are starting on time and you set the right tone. Like what I do in my projects. I'm always the first one to be in the meeting, whether it's online or it's physical. I always make sure that I'm the first one to appear in the meeting. That is very important. If someone joins the meeting, you'll find even some of the participants, they start calling each other that the project manager is in the meeting or the chair is already in the meeting. And always start the meeting on time. Latest five minutes. But within the first 5 minutes, give people just to finish and join. There are some people who come while they're talking, they disturb you. So just give them 5 minutes, even if it means you have a meeting with 2 or 3 people. Unless if you're not forming up a quorum, then you have to make sure that you don't do the meeting. But always start the meeting on time with the right tone. So when you're starting your meeting, always make sure you're reinstating the goals of the meeting. That's what I normally do. There are some people who might have forgotten. There are some people who might have missed the previous meeting. So once you start by reinstating the goals, people would appreciate why they're there. People can even appreciate how long it's going to take them to be in that meeting. No one's going to complain that you're taking too long, as long as they know that we have 3 or 4 goals to meet in the meeting. So we are now on goal number 2. They are just motivated that there's only one more goal and then the meeting is done. So always make sure that you are reinstating, you are re-emphasizing, you are also revisiting the goals of the meeting. That is what I've been doing. It has helped me, and I believe it can also help you in your current projects or in your future projects. Define the agenda and you time box each agenda item. The advantage of time boxing each agenda item is for you to make sure that you keep the time defined. So, long time ago, we used to assign a minute taker for meetings. That was very helpful. But this day and age, we now have AI, artificial intelligence, which is now helping us to take the meetings, which is now helping us to take the minutes, and also at the end of the day, and also at the end of the meeting, it will also help us to summarize. However, that does not take away the need for a minute taker. The reason for a minute taker is you want to emphasize some points and assign responsibility. So every meeting, as a project manager, you must have a minute taker. Someone who's going to record, especially very critical action items, agreed or decided in the meeting proceedings. What I normally do in my projects is I've got a project administrator. So the project administrator, one of the main responsibilities I've given, or TOR, terms of reference for the project administrator, is to be taking minutes in every meeting, whether it's at a high level, project board, whether it's at project management level or team level. As long as the project administrator is invited, is around, is in the meeting, the expectation is to take very important points. But I have it in a 2-step process. I also take the AI notes, the AI summary, and then I also take the minutes from the project administrator, put them together. In most cases, I found that to be very effective. In case there's something that was missed by the project administrator, it will be covered from the AI notes. In case the AI could not translate properly some of the terms used in the meeting, at least you'll find that the minute taker has also picked it properly. So it's very important that even if you're chairing the meeting as a project manager, or you're not even chairing the meeting or any meeting, project meeting, always have someone to take note of very important points, or especially action items. That is very good for the project, and it also makes sure that every meeting that is discussed, there's a follow-up. I've seen some meetings or some project managers who conduct some meetings, and then there's no summary of action items. So the next section, we are looking at how to drive engagement in a meeting. So there are so many different ways as a project manager or in a project environment where you can engage participants, or where you can drive engagement from participants. So that is what we're going to cover in this section. Okay, part 1 of the section is always encourage active participation. Don't go to a meeting as a project manager and you're dominating the whole meeting. Each and every point, it's you to talk. Each and every point, it's you to decide. Each and every point, it's you to guide. That does not constitute a meeting. As a project manager, one of the things you need to do is to learn to listen. I've done a video on how to improve your skills. I've done a video on the lessons that I've learned as a project manager. You can also watch it. And one of the most important lessons that I've learned is to learn to listen as a project manager. Throughout my experience, that is what I always do. In a meeting, listening attentively and talking less, you gain more than talking more and listening less. So that is very crucial as a project manager. Always have active participation from the members. Ask for their inputs also. And also, if you think the active participation is being affected by your presence, then try to rotate the facilitation, either from you, from someone else who is senior from the project. I've seen that working in my environment. There are certain meetings, they are more or they are better being chaired by a technical guy, because it's a technical meeting, than a project manager. So as a project manager, you can also become a participant. But just make sure that everyone is participating in the discussion of the meeting, whether it's for brainstorming, whether it's an update, or it's for decision making. And also, when you're driving engagement in a meeting, just make sure you don't go off topic. I've seen scenarios in one of my projects where a project member, instead of focusing on what we're discussing, because they'd delayed in the completion of some of the deliverables, they were trying in a certain way to divert us or to digress us to discuss something off topic. So I had to bring back the meeting to the right topic. I had to ask everyone to focus on what we were doing. So most projects, there are so many discussions that are done, either with the vendor, with the implementation partner, or subcontractor. So when you're running some of these meetings, like what I normally do, always try to use visual presentation where it's possible. Visual presentations, they have an advantage of making sure that people are looking at the same thing, people are understanding and appreciating the same, they're discussing on the same item. So every meeting room, try to make sure that at least you have some whiteboards, or at least you can even use the Kanban boards, just to make sure that things are very clear. That is very important. You should always have some visual representation of the discussions, especially if it's a technical discussion. It's not very easy for someone to be describing things like this. But if you give them a pen and a paper, or if it's online, they use the whiteboard software, then they can demonstrate exactly what they mean, or they can explain further what they mean for a certain concept. That is very important to clarify things in a meeting. The next section I'm going to clarify is on decision making during meetings. As you go through the meetings, like what I normally do, make sure you're summarizing the action points as you go. Summarizing the very important points is very important. It's very important because it creates an environment where everyone is aware of what is being discussed. Everyone is appreciating the discussions in the meeting. So summarizing the action points, it makes it very easy for people. Someone might not have understood a certain point, but as you summarize, they can even understand it better. So as you run your meeting, like what I normally do in my meetings, always make sure that every important point is documented, every important point is also summarized. Then, after summarizing the important points, also make sure you're giving ownership, especially on action item. If you want something to be completed tomorrow, for example, don't just summarize it as something to be completed tomorrow. For example, I want a certain report to be created by tomorrow. Don't just say, I want a report to be created by tomorrow. You are supposed to say, I want a report to be created by tomorrow by a certain individual. For example, my name is Oscar. I want this report to be prepared tomorrow by Oscar. Let it be very clear. Don't leave any ambiguity from the meeting. Then, after assigning an owner of an action item, also make sure that you have a deadline. People should not come out of the meeting without knowing when a specific activity is going to be done. That is poor management. That is poor project management. The proper project management, everything must have an action item, an owner, and also a deadline. So that is very important when it comes to decision making and tracking in a meeting. Summarize. Now we have given action to be done, the owner, and the deadline. You must also try to seek verbal agreement from the owners of the action items in every meeting. Because remember, you are now summarizing. You are summarizing the meeting, giving an owner, and then a deadline. Let the owners confirm. I've seen some meetings where the owners are not consultant, and then after a week or two, you find the action was not done. Once you try to investigate what was the issue, they will just say, but I never agreed to that. Why are you saying I should be delivering that today? So from my experience, just make sure there is also verbal or non-verbal communication from the owners of the action. That is how we can get the items done. So, as you make the decisions, as you also check the proceedings of the meeting, make sure you're documenting all the important points and decisions. If it's necessary, like these days, we are now using more of online meetings, using Teams or Zoom. Just make sure you also share your screen and pinpoint the action points which are supposed to be done and the individuals who are supposed to be doing that. Make sure that when you are assigning work to be done, don't assign anyone who is not in the meeting. For me, it's a total no. If someone is not in the meeting, don't assign them work. Assign people who are in the meeting. Those people will pass the message and discuss. with the person who was not in the meeting. Someone was not in the meeting which took 1 hour, then you expect them to do some work. So you give the leaders in the meeting to take ownership of that as they discuss with whoever is outside the meeting. Never assign work to someone who is outside the meeting. It will give you the burden to explain to them from the beginning what exactly was being discussed in the meeting for them to pick up that action. But if it's one of their leaders or one of their managers who is taking ownership, they are always making sure that that activity is completed. That is very crucial as a project manager. So the last section or the last expectation when you're running project meetings effectively is you should be able to wrap up or to close the meeting. So how do you wrap up? You need to recap on the main activities. You need to recap on the main points. You need to recap on the main decisions. You also need to recap on the next steps. That is the best practice of running a project. And also allow for questions and clarifications. People are different. There are some who are very quick to understand and appreciate the discussion. There are some who will take long, and then later on, once they manage to figure out what has been discussed, they might have clarifications or questions. Allow yourself to accommodate different characters, different behaviors, or even different people from different parts of the world. They are also different. So once you allow yourself to accommodate, by the time you're going to ask for clarifications towards the end of the meeting, don't restart the meeting. Clarify, especially for the points which are not very clear to the members. Because the intention is not for you to show off that you know something. The intention is to make sure that every participant of the meeting is appreciating the goal of the meeting and also was also engaged. Or if there's something which was not clear, you also clarify before they leave the meeting. The second part is to make sure that you confirm if there's going to be any follow-up meeting. Like what I normally do, assuming I have a meeting in the morning, around 10, for example, mid-morning, and there are some action items I expect to be completed the same day. I normally request for either 2 or 3 p.m. I call it checkpoint meeting, just to see what we agreed in the morning. How is the team performing towards the closure of those items? You need to make sure that is done. If you just leave it, there's no follow-up meeting. Maybe it's something that has to be done in 2 weeks. You wait for 2 weeks, you'll be shocked. After 2 weeks, nothing has been done. So it's better to always have some follow-up meetings, especially on most of the important activities you need in the project. Then the last part of it is you should always end the meeting in a positive note and also in a decisive position. I normally do that. Every meeting, I have to make sure that people, they accept, they appreciate why they were in a meeting. They also accept and appreciate that the meeting was not time wasting. So you need to clarify. Remember, we said you need to summarize. You also need to clarify that we were in this meeting and our intention was to achieve or to make this decision. This is the decision that we have taken in this meeting. So from the meeting, this is the takeaway. That is very important to end a meeting. Don't end a meeting in such a way that people, I've seen some cases where even some project managers will end a meeting. No one knows the meeting has ended. People are still there online or people are still sitting physically. So end it in a positive note, in a decisive way, and also communicate to the team that the meeting has ended. We'll meet again on a certain date, like that. Then the last section I'm going to highlight is the post-meeting follow-up or post-meeting best practice. So you have been running a meeting. You have concluded the meeting, you have summarized the meeting, you have taken the minutes. Then what? The very important thing that I've applied in my project is always do some follow-ups after the meeting. One of the follow-ups is to make sure that you document, you communicate, you share the meeting action items so that there's nothing that is missed from the project. If you don't share, some people are not taking minutes, some people on the phone, some on the laptop, some were even sleeping. I've seen some people sleeping somewhere. So if you don't send them what was discussed, they will not act on it and you won't progress in the project. So the best is to send them what has been agreed, what has been discussed, with names, with deadlines, so that at least they can act on it. So it's a very important best practice for post-meeting activity. So make sure that is done. The second part of it is what I normally do after every meeting, especially the meetings which have taken long or very critical meetings for the project. Always check to get any feedback from participants in terms of how the meeting proceeded, how the meeting concluded, how the meeting was conducted. So that is very important. Once you get that feedback, try to make better the next meeting you're going to have. That is very important. That's how you can improve in terms of learning, in terms of experience. Accept positively the feedback from the team. Feedback is very important when you're a project manager. Don't ever ignore any feedback, whether good or bad, it's you or it's someone else. If they're saying it's you who is the problem, work on correcting what they're, as long as you have accepted that it's a problem. So always get feedback from the team in terms of how the proceedings of the meeting had gone through. That is very important. You should also use project management tools to follow up some of these things, to also put the timelines on some of these things. For example, you can use the Trello, you can also use Asana or even Microsoft Project tools, just to make sure that all the action items that were agreed in the meeting, there's a follow-up action to them, and there are specific individuals assigned to it. There's also a defined start end date or start end time, depending on the level of documentation that you want to make. So that clarifies everything. The tools also make it easy if you want to do some filters, some selections, some reports, and so on and so forth. So this day and age, you can either choose to do a meeting online or offline. So meetings these days have been made very simple. Previously, every meeting was physical. Phone call meetings have never worked anyway. So you would find, for example, myself, I had to travel to another country just for a 30 minutes or 1 hour meeting. But these days, things have changed. Most of the meetings are now being done online, either using Zoom or using Teams. So just make sure you're using one of these reliable meeting tools so that it doesn't drop off during the discussion. You might end up missing a lot of things. So a meeting these days can be physical or virtual, if you want to call it, or online. But a meeting is a meeting. The advantage of these days, you're able to share your screen, you're even able to draw diagrams on a whiteboard, software whiteboard, and make things very, very clear. So conducting the meeting effectively for both online and non-online is the same. You have to remain professional all the way. You need to summarize your points all the way. You have to remain professional in either of those. You have to remain professional in either of the two options, physical or online. You still have to take notes. You still have to take action points. You still have to summarize the meeting proceedings so that everyone can understand. If you want me to do another additional video based on what we have discussed earlier in terms of how to effectively run a project meeting, or you have any questions or clarifications, let me know in the comment section below.